We're gonna get started on the post-show conversation. My name is Nathan Winkelstein. I'm the producing director at Red Bull Theater. I'll be moderating. We all know how post-show conversations work. I'll start by prompting a couple of questions, and then I'll ask for questions from the audience, and then we'll get about 50% questions and 50% statements. But I would love for it to be 100% questions. So we're gonna try tonight, and it's gonna be really exciting when we succeed at getting 100% questions. Now, I'd love to start by asking if one of our scholars or both of you could maybe sit into José's mind for a second and give us a little bit of the genesis of this specific piece, what the inspiration was for it and what its growth was.
Yeah, absolutely. So the play was commissioned by Mark Bucher, who's the artistic director at the Pacific Conservatory Theater out in Santa Maria, California. And he'd worked with José before, and they were thinking about doing a Shakespeare adaptation together, but they really wanted it to be rooted in place, and specifically on the land where their theater is situated. And so that prompted a few things, the first of which is to tell the history of California, and thinking about the 16-year gap in The Winter's Tale as an opportunity to think about the 16 years prior to the U.S. invasion of Mexico, and then the immediate aftermath of that invasion, and how that was yet another layer of colonization on this land. And interrogating those layers of colonization led them to reach out to the Santa Ynez Band of Chumash Indians, to collaborate with them, not only to incorporate their culture, but also to incorporate their language, which at that time had been newly reawakened, thanks to a collaboration with a linguist and the tribe. And something that's really, I think, was unexpected for them was the fact that the plot of The Winter's Tale mapped on so interestingly to the story of how that language had been preserved 6 generations prior, but was taken away, and yet was there lying dormant, and could be recovered, much like the baby in The Winter's Tale.
That's amazing, thank you. And Maddie, this is Maddie, the wonderful director of the... We sort of handed you a monster of a project with this one, because of all of the quite delicate cultural exploration that this play does so beautifully. It's, believe it or not, somewhat tricky to think through when one is thinking about how to put forward a one-day reading. And I wonder when we first came to you with it, you can take this wherever you want. What excited you about the piece, or what the challenge was, or sometimes if that was one and the same, and what you found in working on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of things excited me about the piece. I mean, one, I love adaptation, and so being able to see like the very specific ways in which José was engaging with The Winter's Tale and how they made so much sense for right now was really thrilling to me. But also, honestly, as someone who works a lot, both in the classics and then in contemporary Native theater, we end up in contemporary Native theater working on a lot of plays where the entire structure of the play is Indigenous peoples and settlers, and it's always like Native people and white people, and there's actually like no interculturality beyond that actually is being engaged with in the play, and that's not actually the way the world works. And so for me, it was just so exciting to actually be able to sit in a space where things are more complicated the way that they are in real life, and that actually really feels like it reflects a lot of the sort of like intercultural exchanges that not only were happening in California then, but are happening in California now. And so all of that was just, I think, really exciting to me. And also this idea in the play of faith as intergenerationality is just, I think, really, really beautiful and really healing, in that there are all of these cycles of violence that exist, but actually like in looking through time, looking at family, but looking at family like beyond one given moment, right? In the ways that the young people move backwards in time for their lesson, whereas Winter's Tale moves forward. I just think there's just a lot of like really amazing layers that I think bring a lot of the core things that we think about in both the classics and then Indigenous theater into conversations with all these other cultures that then get to be in the room and be in conversation as well, which is just, I mean, that's just super exciting. And also language. I'm a big language nerd, So having one day, that was the thing that was most stressful for me, because I'm like, oh, there's all these languages that we're not going to do justice. But just getting to even working on a piece that actually has many languages represented is also just very thrilling, right? That it's not just Spanish, it's not just Somali, but there's also Irish, there's also a Russian, there's also, you know what I mean? It's just like, it feels very like full, like our world in that way.
And I also thought it was credit to José and credit to the performers and the direction, how incredibly clear the play is in the intersection of all of these languages. Even for a Luddite like me who only knows English, as it still came through. Speaking of the multiple cultures, Kate, I wonder if you could speak to this. It was interesting to me to learn that there were Irishmen and Russian Jews in Mexican California at the time, and I'm assuming that is historically accurate, and I wonder if you know anything about the dramaturgical choice of including characters so specific like that?
Well, in particular, the figure of Don Patricio is a reference to the Patricios, or the San Patricios, right, who were Irish people who were tired of the way they were being treated in the United States and really went to Mexico and took up the cause and fought on behalf of Mexico during the Revolution. And so that is an interesting example of that, intercultural space of the borderlands. And I think it's really interesting too, because José is a well-known Chicano playwright who is often thinking about Chicanx identity and also the intersections of Chicanx identity and indigenous identity, and then thinking through the experiences of other settlers, right, in the borderlands in this play in particular. So you get the multi-layeredness of that space for sure.
Thank you. So first, can we give our wonderful actors another round? And Carlo all first-time Red Bull, you did an online, I think, with us, right?
So, yeah.
Yes, first-time in-person Red Bull reading actors, and I'm so happy that you all were able to do this. You were all amazing. Thank you so much. I'll state this generally, but this is such a general question, but how did you find attacking this script and coming at it both from each of your individual backgrounds and experiences and tackling the text, as well as just as an actor trying to explore the complexity of this particular story in 5 hours in one day?
Yeah. I really like that question. I was really excited to be asked to be part of this project. I'll introduce myself. Osiyanagad Bailey Takudo Ayat Chichalegi. My name is Bailey Frankenberg. I'm an enrolled member of the Cherokee Nation. I'm also Choctaw. And I have both Native and, ancestry from colonizers. So I have I felt kind of connected to Hermonia in that way, of this kind of being from two worlds and how you sort of walk in a world where you're of sort of a conflicting story, and what that means for you and what that means for your family. And so that was something that I personally related to, and I'm also not a native Spanish speaker, so that was sort of a not anxious thing to attack, but I was looking forward to the challenge of putting Spanish into my mouth and making it feel natural, which is, also trying to learn my ancestral language is also something that is, I'm trying to pick up a lot of. So I think that was there are a lot of things that I connected with. That's me.
I love The Winter's Tale. It's one of my favorite Shakespeare plays. And, I've always kind of admired it from afar and seen the character of Leonardo and been like, ooh, that's hard. I think I won't ever have to do that. So it was interesting to kind of, have to tackle it. And I mean, it was really satisfying. It's a really, really tricky, hard character to kind of get and to understand. Obviously, it takes weeks and weeks and weeks when you get 5 hours. But it was fun. I really enjoyed the challenge, and I really, I love multiple languages in plays. I'm a Spanish speaker, it's my first language, and I appreciate that mix of culture, and I appreciate José Cruz González's tackling of this material and putting it in this world, which feels a lot more connected to me certainly than Shakespeare's world would.
I've got some Russian Jew in me. Andrew Rothenberg. Honestly, I don't know Winter's Tale at all. And I came into this and I was excited to get to work on this. And, oh, cool, take a look at it. And I have such a hard time reading Shakespeare. It's just, I think some people can relate to that. It's much easier to watch or to listen to or to get, have scenes, so then it's easier to read. So I honestly had a really hard time reading this. And I went back to it again and just took my time and really went through it. And once I started to see what actually was happening, and I still didn't understand until I got here today and heard it out loud with everyone talking, I was like, oh, that's what's, oh my God. It made me desperately want to go back a couple days knowing what I know now and work on, really dig into it further. So I honestly, it's hard for me to say right now. It's still all very fresh in my mind, but I really, really love seeing it come to life. Even between showing up today at noon and then getting up here at 7:30, it really came to life. You guys really, everyone did, brought to life in a way that I had no idea, this morning when I woke up that it was going to be, or that it was going to interest me or excite me quite as much as it did.
And I will say, I think we should, I think Jesse mentioned it at the beginning, but we were first introduced to this project through a project that Music Earnest, who is here in the audience, was doing with us last season, the Early Modern Scene Work Collaborative, which is about a number of different things, but at its core is about bringing scholars and theater practitioners together and how we can learn from one another and expand both of our crafts from it. And I will say that it was speaking to the kind of growth just from this morning to this evening is really a credit to the ensemble work of all three of the wonderful Borderland scholars and Maddie and these actors all working together to create something in this short period of time. And it's really quite an exciting proof of concept in many ways of that work. And that's thrilling for us at Red Bull to see that come into practice. So shout out.
I also want to just throw in, I grew up in California and I never found any California history. It was just, nothing was interesting. Well, let's go on a field trip to a mission. That's okay. What is this? I don't know. Can we go home now? And just I'd never seen anything that really addresses the history of California. Maybe because it's not as old as, some other places, as pretty much most other places. But it just makes me so curious now to find out more and to really learn about it.
I also think just something in response to that I think is really powerful about the way it represents the history of California is that it doesn't do it, it acknowledges how violent the history is, on multiple tiers. It acknowledges how violent the history is against Indigenous people and then how violent then this other period of history also is, and yet still has all of this healing, which I think is just really, really, because I feel when we think about a lot of the depiction of California is always this just sunny, perfect thing, and it doesn't make it completely negative in any way, shape, or form, but it really does something that I think very few works do in terms of actually acknowledging those layers.
And I would add too, I think there are so many things that are so brilliant about the way José takes the details of the Winter's Tale and adapts them, but the bear flag is brilliant, and exactly for the reasons that Maddie was just mentioning, because the bear flag that the state of California now is associated with has this settler colonial history, and the Bear Flaggers Revolt was not successful. But it wasn't until the 20th century that essentially white supremacists decided that this should be the state flag of California. They kind of resurrected this flag of rebellion. And now it flies over the state of California. You see it in all the tourist shops when you go to LA, but nobody knows that history that's behind it. So by putting it into conversation with a play that has a famous bear in it, José really opens up this history and activates it, in a subtle way. It doesn't, hit you over the head with it, but it's there.
And by centering indigenous presence in California, right, from the earliest history into the present, especially through the figure of alegría and also edmonia, but thinking about the way indigenous culture has persisted and survived and thrived and also been subject, people have been, communities have been subjected to this violence, but I think there's like that hope there that's very much part of the revitalization of the Samara language and also cultural lifeways as well. So I just think it's so many times when we hear the history of California or of the West, it's always just kind of like a manifest destiny kind of history, and so I think this complicates it in interesting ways.
I really appreciate it. Sorry, the levels and degrees of colonialism and racism, because there's like the people that are granted lands by the Spanish who see themselves as the owner of the land, but they're also who are now white, who were Mexican, but and then the United States came in and the white settlers came in and then they were colonized. So there's all these levels of like oppression that you don't really. It's not like one or the other, and I think that's really it. This play really makes that clear. It's really
Let's open it up to the audience if any of you have any questions. The first one's always the hardest. There we are.
It's not a question.
We're going 0%, y'all.
It seems to me that it takes an awful lot of bravery and courage to attempt to do an adaptation of The Winter's Tale, which is one of Shakespeare's most gorgeous plays, with a concluding scene that is simply unique, and I can't even think about it without crying. But of course, you're doing a reading, which is a wholly different thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, something I will say to having not met Jose myself, but being a Shakespeare, having devoted my life, obviously, to classical theater and Shakespeare, among other things, is that you see adaptations where the work hasn't been done. And it is very clear when you see an adaptation when the work has been done. And I do think like there are many pieces of art in this world that are adaptations of Shakespeare and inspired by Shakespeare, whether we know it or not. And of course, many of Shakespeare's plays the vast majority of Shakespeare's plays are adaptations of previous works. And so I think it's really, I agree with you that it takes great boldness and great care. And it's also, as a classicist, there's nothing more exciting to me than to see new work carefully inspired by Shakespeare.
And I also think that Jose, in terms of the text itself, if you think about like core dramaturgical moments that The Winter's Tale is known for, he actually preserves all of those, right? Yeah. Like he still has the moment where Hermione traditionally comes back to life. He still has the bear. He still has anything that's sort of like an iconic thing that the audience would otherwise be like missing or cry about. He doesn't skip them, which I think is a very clever way of handling the fact that it is also an adaptation.
Almost to the line. Like
Yeah.
he has like the adaptation of the bug that you would frighten me with, I seek. Like even the truly famous, too hot. The famous lines are even adapted, which I love.
And also, if anything,
Yeah.
he gives us more of Perdita and Florizel,
Yeah.
which I feel like we all want more of anyway. So,
Yeah. Yes.
So this was wonderful and beautiful play and really fascinating. I was curious whether, I love the scenes where Don Leon comes out to the tree and Harmonia is behind. And I just wondered if the way they were done tonight is what you do in a full-scale production, or whether they're intended to be somewhat longer. Because they were very moving even in this very short form. But obviously they were brief. He came out, he stood by the stand, and Harmonia came behind him, and then they sat down. And I just wondered, is that, how would you imagine that? Madeline, you might be the one to answer this, or anybody, in a larger production, would you want a little bit more time for those moments?
I mean, I think anyone can answer that, because obviously anyone could be staging this. But I personally think that you would want long enough probably to acknowledge that the work that is being put into carving the tree.
Right,
Because
right,
that's ultimately what those moments are, is
Right.
they're his moments of repentance.
right,
And so they wouldn't, in no world would they be as short as him taking a step forward and taking a step
Right.
back, because you'd want to establish the action
Right,
of repentance. But I think that fundamentally that's sort
that's
of
the action.
why, yeah, that's the action,
Yeah.
is revisiting him and the fact that he's working his way back toward being in community with his family.
I just thought it was so great because that long, I think it's Act 5, Scene 1, but that scene is so long with the repentance and you're not marrying again, absolutely not, you know.
Yeah.
And it's really, and it was just conveyed so beautifully by those scenes. I was very
Well, I
touched by
also think
them.
it's interesting that he has Harmonia start appearing back pretty quickly
Yes,
in
as
the
the
arc of his
ghost, right.
repentance. Like she's not just gone, like she's already
Yeah.
reappearing.
Yeah.
So she sort of starts out as the ghost and then she mutates into just herself kind of showing up in different moments.
And I think it makes a difference that Don Leon is the producer of the statue.
Yeah, it's huge.
And that it's of
Yeah.
the earth, right? That the tree is rooted, she is rooted of the earth, she and Maximino. It's not this object that, you know, Giulio Romano carved, right? It's of a different substance, but also the repentance is the making of the statue. So I think that that's a way in which we're getting that moment from the statue, but kind of from a worldview perspective, it's a different reanimation.
Yeah.
Any other questions from our audience? Do we have one online? I'm getting nudged. See, some of us actually turn our phones off when we're yelling at my friend from coworker for doing her job. So from online, hi. Isabella would love to know more about the process of how the song/singing came to life in tonight's reading. Was this tune originally in the script, or did it come from the cast?
Brave actors.
Wondering this especially because songs were in different languages.
Yeah, so Jose had said, you know, you can speak, sing it, but if anybody feels like having a go at something, have a go at something. And so I looked to my more musical cast members and I said, any ideas? And then naturally, because actors are wonderful, Bailey was like, I prepared something just in case.
I did not want to show up and be like, I don't know. Like it's one day, so I just, I wrote it. I came up with this lullaby last night. You know, we have the Spanish and we have it sort of in its phrasing. And then I was trying to listen to and Google lullabies that were being sung in Spanish as inspiration. And so I just tried to find a melody, and it was just a melody that I kind of just formed. And then that's the one that kind of attached, and then I recorded it into my phone so that when I went to sleep and woke up, I would remember what I did last night. And that's kind of how that was born.
Yeah, and I will say that, like, normally, obviously, and if this were a production of it, we would make it very, like, specific to what it is that we're doing. But the reason why it seemed, if possible, useful to have them singing something is because the fact that the lullaby is sung in 3 languages, but that it's the same lullaby, feels so immensely important to the story, especially because the moment that she comes back to life is all 3 of them singing the same song. I mean, that just feels to me like, even if what we were singing, even if it wasn't as beautiful as what Bailey, I mean, we also had like really great singers, which was the help. But you know, like it just felt really important that be honored in some way. So I was just very lucky that Bailey was like, just in case.
I did not want to be unprepared.
Thank you, Bailey. For anyone else who's watching online is welcome to send them in, and it'll go through our very high-tech thing right to my phone. And we'll get that. Does anyone else have any questions? We probably have time for 1 or 2 more. Yeah?
Yeah, so for our scholars who have obviously spent a lot of time with the text of the play itself, I was wondering if we could hear more about your experience kind of seeing it come to life today, and if there's anything about the way it was performed that surprised you, maybe having spent time with the text.
Yeah, it was so great to watch you all work today. Like, it was just such a magical process to really see it. And I think there's so much I'm still processing in some ways, but yeah, I think to me, the young couple, Ali and AJ, like just really seeing how they kind of are part of the story, shape the story, are working through their own challenges, right? I think I was just thinking actually about the songs, and the corrido is a big part of, it's often in these Borderlands adaptations, but when the whole group sang it, and I think the actors really reimagined that also in terms of some of their own musical traditions. But I thought it was just so interesting because it's a moment too where Ali and AJ kind of joined the group, right? They're kind of everybody when they're all singing together, and you kind of see the camaraderie, and that they're at the party, and there's still challenges, but there is that joy. But to me, yeah, it was really great to see that, but also just see how moments like the songs also figure into the action of the play itself too. So yeah, it was really cool to watch.
Yeah. I would just add too, thanks to Tana, seeing Paulina and the way that she serves as that bridge between past and present, and how that can be embodied through space, but also through voice, and really guiding not just those young characters, but also us and the characters in the 19th century. And also this play is very funny in places. It was great to laugh with you because Kate, Adrianna, and I spent months editing this play for the Bard in the Borderlands, and we would chuckle about things that were in this play. But it was so wonderful to hear a room full of people laughing at the vaquero and afilado scenes, but also some of the wry humor among the characters.
Great. That was a great question. We have time for one more if we need it.
I just wanted to ask, when was this written?
2010 is when it had its premiere.
Well, that's interesting. Because there were some references, in there that seemed so now. Especially when she said, no kings, some of that. I was like, wow. So I just had to ask, when was it written? Great.
The office line, running for office.
Yeah.
I was so spot on.
I think that's what I love both about adaptation and also anything that engages with history, because I feel like anything that depicts history for some reason, because like history repeats itself, you just end up with all these levels where you're like, whoa, it's like it's talking to me again in a new way, like each day.
I feel like you just gave Red Bull Theater's mission statement. Classical theater speaks to today. History repeats itself whether we want it to or not. I think on that note, we'll probably call it. Thank you all for joining us online. Thank you all for joining us in person.